I was living on a farm, just me and my brother. I don't know, oh, my sister had been adopted out. She got adopted out. I remember she cried and cried. We all cried because we thought we'd never see her again. But she got adopted out, and my brother and I got sent to this farm in Zanesville, or Dresden, Ohio, actually, outside of Zanesville, in Dresden, Ohio. And it was with my real dad's, Clarence's mother. I forget her name now. Oh, it'll come to me. Anyway, we lived on that farm. She was remarried. She was married to a guy named Ralph. Oh, Tilly. Tilly was her name. She was married to a guy named Ralph, and he was meaner than my dad. He ran a dairy farm. We had to milk the cows and get the milk out in these big cans, set them out, we set them in a thing full of cold water for them, and then a truck come by and picked them up. And we grew our own food for the cows. And we had horses to run the farming equipment and everything. Well, I can remember this one summer, and it was hot, and we were loading hay, loose hay, on the hay wagon. You know, it was all cut, and Ralph was driving the team, and my brother and I were going along with a pitchfork throwing it up. Well, after it got so high, I couldn't get it up there anymore. So he'd get mad and take them horse reins and smack me across the back with them. So finally one night I said to my brother one night, I said, I'm not putting up with this crap anymore. So I took off. Made my way down to Cincinnati hitchhiking. God, I don't know how old I was. Anyway, I got into Cincinnati, and I thought, I know where this bar is that my mom hung around all the time. They'll know where she's at. So I went to this bar, and it was getting close to midnight. Anyway, I went into this bar, and they said, no, we haven't seen your mom for about a year. We have no idea where she's at. Who are you with? And I told him, I said, I'm by myself. He said, well, we're going to have to do something. We can't let you roam the streets, and you can't stay here. This is a bar. Although back then I went into the bar a lot. You know, I'd go in and buy, they had these buckets that you could get beer in, and for the one guy where I used to live, he'd give me a nickel to go get him a bucket of beer, and when they come back, he'd share the beer with me. And I was just a little kid too, but I loved it. Anyway, he said, we're gonna have to put you in the orphanage overnight. So he called this friend of his who was a Cincinnati police officer. And so he came down and he made a couple of phone calls, and he come over and he said, they don't have any openings at the orphanage, no beds. So he says, what I'm going to do, he says, I'm going to take you over to the detention center just for tonight. It's got to be like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning at this time. He said, tomorrow somebody will come and get you, and they'll find a place for you to stay. So I said, okay. So they took me over to this detention center, and I walked in, and it was a top floor in downtown Cincinnati, in a Hamilton County courthouse building. And so I walked in, and they made me take a shower, and they gave me a bed and everything. And next day, nothing. Just went on and on and on. And 3 or 4 months, and this was the place where they kept kids till they had their hearing, and then they sent them off to Lancaster or home, depending on what they were bringing in everything from just theft to assault and battery and rapists and everything else. We had one big room we played in, and everybody was meaner than hell to everybody, and I was a skinny little runt then too. I didn't have much strength, still don't. And I had this one colored boy that kind of took me under his wing, and he wouldn't let anybody touch me. I was so impressed with that. Anyway, I was there for probably 3 or 4 months, and the guards kept saying, you know, when's your hearing? And I said, what's a hearing? And they explained to me, that's where you go before a judge for whatever you did wrong. I said, I didn't do nothing. He said, yeah, that's what everybody says. But this one guard, he was a nicer guy, he said to me, you know, there's something wrong here. He said, what's your name again? So then it was Smith. I told him Donald Smith. So he went up to the front, checked, and he said, they don't have any record of you being here. So he got a hold of one of the caseworkers in Hamilton County, and she came up and got me a foster home to stay in. But I'm going to back up a few minutes while I was there. They did find my real mom. How, I don't know. She came to visit me. She looked terrible. She told me she just had her teeth taken out, but she looked so skinny, like she was dying. And she said she would be back to get me. Well, 5 or 6 weeks went by and nothing. She skipped out again. They couldn't find her. And while I was in there, another thing a couple of things that happened in there that impressed me. One of them was we were in church. They had church service on Sundays. And we were in church, and the minister told a joke or something, you know. But anyway, some of them laughed, and I was one of them. Well, after the service, they took us back in this, what they call a lockup room, which was just a big room with nothing but tables in it. There's nothing to do but play cards. We had cards and stuff. Anyway, he came back in and he got 3 of the guys, 2 or 3, I think it was 3 of the guys, and let them go out into what they called the bullpen, which was a big room on the top of the floor, had bars over the roof, but walls all around it, so you couldn't get out. If you did, you were like 10 stories high. And he told them to go on out in the bullpen. And then he come back in and locked the door behind him and told the rest of the group, he said, I don't know where you guys come from, but where I come from, anybody that laughs in church has to be taught a lesson. He said, I'm going to let you out, and I want you to teach those guys a lesson. Well, needless to say, because I chuckled too, I was scared, but he evidently didn't see me, because I was sitting back and they were sitting more in the front. He left those guys out, and they beat those guys, one of them to death, and the other 2 they had to take out in the stretcher. Because he just let them loose in the bullpen, locked the door, and walked away. And I'm standing on the far corner watching it, and I mean, I'm shaking in my boots, because I think, if somebody remembers me laughing, I'm next. But it was horrible to see, absolutely horrible. I can remember that every day for breakfast we had the same thing, a bowl of Wheaties and a couple slices of toast. Except I remember on Easter morning we were there, and besides the Wheaties and toast, we got a hard-boiled egg and a dish prunes. We always had 2 prunes in a dish. That was our breakfast. I can't remember what the afternoons and evening meals was. I know one thing for sure, when you're hungry, it doesn't matter, you eat it anyway. But, so finally then this one guard went out and checked and got a hold of the caseworker and brought her in. And I remember her, Mrs. Tragesser was her name. And I can remember because she had one leg shorter than the other, so the sole on her shoe was about that thick. That's how much shorter the one leg was than the other, and she kind of walked with a limp, of course, carrying that much weight. But she took me out of there, and it was going toward winter when I went in, because it was dark out, not dark, but you know, cloudy and everything. But when I came out, it must have been in the summer, because I walked out of the front of that building, and the sun was so bright and the grass was so green it hurt my eyes. Because, understand, we had no windows or nothing where we were at. We had one window in the back that looked over to the jail where the male convicts were, not the kids. But even that, it had wire in it and stuff, you couldn't hardly see out of it. But she took me out, and she took me to a department store of some kind, and she bought me some clothes. And I'll never forget how excited I was, because it was all brand new. They weren't used. And I wasn't used to having new clothes. And she bought me shoes and a couple pairs of pants and underwear and undershirts and shirts. And I didn't know what was going on. I thought, this is life, I'll take it, you know.